Welcome to video 2 in my War Robots commentary series. Before we begin, I want to say thank you for the comments, encouragement and feedback received on my first video. I wasn't expecting such a positive response, and I'm glad that you can take something useful, or at the very least something enjoyable from this. In this video you're going to see 3 clips focused on the larger open maps in the game, and the main tactic employed is how the smaller bots can be very useful for harassment and distracting the enemy far away from my stronger but more vulnerable teammates to eventually herd the enemies into a group and push to a win. The first clip is a return to the canyon map, with a very quick but strong win to get us warmed up before moving on to the more evenly matched games. So, let's begin. My Gareth comes out once more, and I check to see where the friendly stalker is going to decide which beacon to take. On the way I quickly scan for snipers and catch what looks to be a quick or Kang-Dae Natasha, so I'm careful to keep my shield angled towards her to absorb any hits. I see the enemy team have divided themselves up, with the group on my right staying around their spawn, so I assume they're heavy snipers and move in to take Beacon D and lay down some suppressing fire to get their attention away from my team and create a zone of pressure on their spawn area, all the while forcing any of the respawning bots to focus their attention on me while the rest of my team advance forward. A quick Natasha notices my presence and very slowly and futilely attempts to dissuade my capture. I block her quickfire just in time and begin pressuring the Natasha into a retreat. She's aware of her dire situation and understandably ejects early. I see a Thunder Leo advancing to my left and wanted to focus on me, so I try to draw his attention, but I'm unsuccessful. However, I do manage to draw fire from the Natasha behind him instead. I notice the red arrow to my right and turn to check the weapons. I see what looks like an Orkan on the golem, so I manage to get away just in time before he could complete a flank on me and do some serious damage. I'm looking to create pressure by engaging who I can in the area and getting their attention on me while staying mobile and avoiding or blocking as many hits as I can. The second golem I encounter was luckily a bad aim with his Orkan, so I take minimal damage from the encounter with him, but he is using a Thunder, so I don't want to stay close for long and instead set my sights on the second Natasha whilst trying to remain aware of the enemies to my right and strafing left to avoid as much fire as I can before repositioning to block. The Natasha goes down whilst the golem continues his pursuit of me. I'm able to face and block most of his fire whilst outrunning some of his Orkans, but the ones that did hit me damage my legs, meaning I can no longer evade them. But as he falls down the hill while chasing me, his Orkan is shot off, allowing me some precious few moments to finish him off. The Natasha behind him then goes for a weak trebuchet shot but misses. I know all I can do now is try and liberate Beacon A before I'm taken down. I see I've successfully gained the attention of 3 enemies and used the remainder of my shield to block incoming missile pressure. I'm able to neutralize Beacon A but take fire from a Terran Griffin and go down before I can complete the capture. Nearly all of the enemy team are clustered close to their spawn now, and the initial assault against them was effective enough to create an almost unwinnable situation for them at this stage. One of the advantages of pressuring the enemy in such a way is that it can cause them to lose sight of the main objective and instead focus on revenge and vendettas against the players that placed them in that situation, hampering their better judgment and so resulting in more predictable and reckless behavior from them. It should be noted, however, that such tactics are less effective against organized teams of clan members or friends, as these groups have a higher social incentive to win and protect each other and are more likely to be focused. With the warm-up game out of the way, we're going to go next to the Springfield map to look at using the open terrain to your advantage by baiting and evading enemy salvos away from your teammates. I tend to normally take the open ground when using the Gareth on this map due to the city section containing too much cover for enemy knife fighters to move in and too little space for reliably evading their salvos. At my spawn location, Beacon E is always my priority, as sometimes your team will assume someone else will take it and then it's left uncaptured for a long enough time for an enemy to gain an avoidable advantage. My objective is to claim Beacon C and distract and disrupt the inevitable battle at Beacon D whenever possible and hopefully create a kill enclosure around their spawn area. As I head toward D, I know the Natasha in the distance is tracking me, and I'm not sure if she's using quicks or Kang-Daes, but I know I'm protected by the ground ahead of me, so I don't need to raise my shield just yet. After seeing her shot, I predict that she's using Kang-Daes and begin counting the reload time in my head so I can cover as much ground as I can before having to raise my shield again. But my prediction was completely wrong, and upon seeing her fire I tried to block, but I was too slow to react and take damage. I look to my left to check D, and I see that my teammates are being pushed away from the beacon by a Cossack and an unknown enemy. I struggle for a moment, deciding whether to help them or push on and take C. I decide to abandon my plan and assist at D and move in, confident that at least the Cossack will fall quickly. I know that Natasha is still tracking me, so I block her predictable shots, and by the time I arrive, only the Cossack is left standing. He's quickly dispatched of while I'm still noting the Natasha tracking me, and I keep my shield facing her at all times. However, the enemy team was successful in distracting me this time, allowing them a chance to regroup and converge on my position while I'm positioned against an insurmountable hill, meaning I'll need to backtrack in order to get to Beacon C. I corner peek to check their weapons, and they greet me with a swarm of missiles. I stay close to a wall to avoid taking any more shield damage. I peek out to try and get some hits on the spiral pattern, but immediately notice a Columbus Griffin and instinctively know that I'm almost within his attack range, so I have to back away. I can see he's tracking me, so I stay out of attack range whilst waiting for an opportunity to advance. He then fires on a teammate, so I use this opportunity to push forward, but I'm then immediately halted by the sight of a trebuchet Régime waiting for me to expose myself, followed quickly by the attention of the spiral pattern, whom decides to engage on me also. At this stage I'm hesitant to approach because I feel the enemy presence is too heavy and close to have a reasonable chance of taking Beacon C, so I'm forced to hold and keep the enemies busy until an opportunity presents itself. I move in to suppress the pattern, and as I do this I can see the Columbus Griffin looking at me, and I realize that I'm just within his attack range, so I backpedal and just manage to avoid his rockets in time. Knowing that the Columbus Griffin is now defenseless, I try to advance, but the spiral pattern re-engages on me and forces me to retreat once more to look for a better opening. I decide I need to move in on the pattern and do so via the structures to reduce the attack opportunities of the Griffin behind him. I suppress the pattern's advance and hold position expecting a retaliation from him, but instead a Hydra Griffin user to my left opens fire and pressures me into cover. I have 3 enemies engaging me, and I'm completely suppressed at this point. But then a teammate enters the battle and forces the Columbus Griffin to retreat, allowing me some breathing space and just enough time to see the next Hydra salvo to block half of them. I turn my attention back to the spiral pattern, who is making a futile attempt at capturing the beacon, and is quickly finished by another teammate who has just pushed forward to support us. I'm desperate to finish my mission to take Beacon C, and can see that Columbus Griffin is still waiting for a chance to finish me off, so I use my range to bait an attack from him, but he's not stupid and only takes about half the bait and fires just his pins. At the time I didn't realize and was certain my teammate would finish him off, but he saved the Columbus for my teammate, who heavily damages him before falling to the salvo. I try to finish the job, but lag gets the better of me, and a plasma griffin I failed to see takes me down, failing my mission to take the beacon, but successful in keeping them busy for a while. I decide to bring in my long-range support Leo to continue the suppression and pressure from a distance, so the enemies don't get confident enough to push forward too far. I really enjoy this setup because the combined geckos can output decent damage at higher levels, but for me their biggest asset is the psychological effect it has on the targets, often causing them to run for cover or expend their special abilities at an inefficient moment, as well as boosting the confidence of advancing teammates who can see the enemy is already damaged. I'm careful to try and engage on the enemy when I have at least 2 or 3 seconds of charge left in my geckos, and can also fire my quick at the same time when possible. I found the beam needs to last for at least that amount of time to trigger the fleeing instinct in most players and to do any noteworthy damage. Having patience and control over your trigger finger is an important aspect of this setup. I still want to try and capture Beacon C and retake Beacon D on the way. A friendly Thunder Leo joins my advance and we engage a Plasma Griffin and Magnum Jeopard. I try to dissuade the Griffin from approaching my teammate, but it doesn't work, so I instead turn my attention to the Jeopard and succeed in suppressing him. But overall I was too slow and my teammate falls from their combined damage. I finished a Plasma Griffin and know that with his low health the Jeopard will fall to me in direct one-on-one combat, so I don't bother to take cover and immediately engage, but another teammate finishes him off instead. I see a Merlin Griffin to my left engaging on a helpless teammate. My desire to help once again gets the better of me, so I open fire on him. He jumps away and retreats to cover. I continue to see while turning my attention to a nearby Rhino and Griffin to assist my teammate's attack. The Griffin goes down and the Rhino is forced into cover. Seeing a Molo Griffin enter the fray, I allow myself to become too involved in my support role and abandon my charge on Beacon C in favor of the enemy suppression instead. He retreats behind cover, so I resume my slow march to C, but I notice the team life bar is now low enough so that I won't make it there in time before the match is over. I fire on any exposed enemy I can see before the match ends with a modest victory. If I hadn't allowed myself to get distracted, I would likely have taken Beacon C and gained an extra 5 gold at the end. This match showed a small example of the suppressive effect offered by grouped gecko lasers, and in the next match I will show how the moderate damage it can do from such a long range can demoralize enemies and embolden your teammates to make beacon pushes they would otherwise have not considered if the enemy were at full health. Our final clip is in Yamantau, and as you all know, the beginning is always a very long walk, so I will speed up the footage until we get to some action. When using a faster bot, I feel the most effective area of play on this map is under the main connecting bridge between the two sides, due to the cover offered by the pillars and allowing relatively safe options of advance and retreat when needed. Using plasma weapons here also allows enough range to aggravate the enemies advancing up the central Beacon D ramp, softening their health or distracting them completely, whilst also being covered from the splash damage fire from their spawn area. On my approach, I've noticed what seems to be at least 2 enemy Trident users, who then become my main priority for harassment or destruction, as one good Trident pilot can shut down a team's advance completely, let alone 2 of them. As a light bot, it's always safe to assume that the enemy snipers will prioritize you, as seeing a large chunk of health disappear from a single shot is normally a satisfying experience for most people. All of my movements are based upon this consideration when playing on the larger maps. I approach the central pillar, and a Trident Carnage drops down from the bridge to engage me. He fires on my position but doesn't damage me. I use his reload time to advance to the second pillar and try to angle my shield towards the sniper who I know is still watching me, but he manages to score a hit alongside another Trident user, and I'm now already at less than 50% health. I pressure a nearby Carnage and let him know that I'm an immediate threat and see that just one burst from my Tyran significantly lowers his health. Unable to attack him further, I turn my attention to a nearby Columbus Griffin and try to bait his fire onto me. He doesn't take the bait, but a nearby Trident fires and misses me instead. While halting the Griffin, I fail to notice another Trident user behind him has opened fire, and he reduces me to critical health. Also, another Trident user unsuccessfully fires on me again, and I use his reload to get as much damage into the nearby Carnage before I go down, as staying in my current position would mean certain destruction regardless. The Carnage is reduced to critical, but he does manage to finish me off. I bring in my Gecko Leo to try and keep a control of the central front line and hopefully do substantial damage to the enemy Carnages. The position I move to allows me to maintain a good line of sight on Beacon D and the small bridge, whilst also keeping me out of range from enemy snipers. I see a Stalker and pressure him into prematurely using his stealth, giving him no choice but to run for Beacon D and be defenseless against return fire upon arrival. My team push him out of the zone, which allows me to damage him further before eventually falling to a friendly Leo. I note the Trident user under the small bridge and immediately begin pressuring him. The damage destroys 2 of his weapons, and his legs are also crippled, making him a sitting duck for anyone in range. He ducks behind the pillar before I can finish the job and is instead destroyed by a teammate. I note the Stalker on my right side approaching on the bridge, looking to disrupt our front line, so I open fire on him and force him down into cover. I want to take any opportunity to begin whittling down and suppressing the Trident Carnages so I can begin to gradually move forward, to gain more angles of attack and do as much damage as I can, confident that I can take a few sniper hits before needing to retreat. An enemy Rhino has pushed to Beacon D, but there's nothing I can do about it until his shield is lowered, so I instead focus on the Stalker, who is now pushed dangerously close and has one of my teammates distracted. He takes an almost full attack from me and is then finally finished by a teammate. The Rhino was successful in taking Beacon D, bringing their team to a beacon advantage, but he decides to retreat from his position, allowing us a clear path to potentially retake D. I keep pressure on the Trident Carnage and then engage on a Rhino when his shield is lowered, who is then surrounded by my teammates and taken down. We reclaim the beacon and begin our final push to secure a win. The enemy team seem to have exhausted all of their primary assault setups, and with the exception of the Trident Carnages, are now left with robots with undesirable weapons for the situation. I continue to keep pressure on the Carnage whilst moving from cover to cover to avoid sniper retaliation. The match quickly ends after this, and I end up taking first place and 10 gold, which was an unexpected but nice surprise. Keeping in mind your opponent is human and susceptible to a wide range of psychological tactics such as distraction, harassment, frustration, and suppression can all come together to trigger their passive instinct for self-preservation, which often supersedes actions they might have otherwise taken to go for the win instead. The goal of this series as a primary function is to be informative and useful to the viewer. This channel and concept are still very new and developing, so I welcome any feedback and comments you may have for me. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you found this video useful.